Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to be using React to make a calculator. So here's a preview of the finished project that we'll be making today. So it's just a calculator. We're making this with React today. So let's get started. So I've just set up a React project and we're just going to clean it up a bit here. We're going to get rid of all the files we don't need. So I'm going to get rid of that file. Going to get rid of the logo. Going to get rid of that. Inside in the app then we're going to get rid of the logo and we're going to get rid of everything inside the main div. Save that now and we'll just start up our project. npm start and just open our terminal and type in npm start. Okay, so once our app is started, we'll have our app running on localhost 3000. So I'll just make that a bit smaller. Just adjust the window so we can see both. Now, okay, so quickly type out the JSX. So we're going to have a class name of container. Inside here we're going to have another div and we'll give this a class name of wrapper. Now inside our wrapper then we're going to have a div and we'll give that a class name. We're going to have the screen. Okay, so then after the screen we're going to start creating divs for all our buttons. So our first button is going to be the AC button. So we'll give this a class name of button and then we'll also give it a class of light grey. And it'll be AC. We'll create the functions here as well while we're doing this, and we'll just save some time by doing this. So the on click is going to be equal to a function called reset. We'll create these functions in a few minutes so the app won't break on it. We'll just create empty functions to start out with. Okay, so our next button then is going to be the percent button. So I'm just going to copy this. It's going to be the same class names, but this time we'll have a function called percent. And then we'll have our plus minus button. And the function we'll call here will be minus plus. We'll just change the text in the previous one. That's going to be a percent sign, and this is going to be the plus slash minus. And then we'll have our division button. So our division button will have a class name of button, and it'll have a class name of orange, and it'll be calling a function which we'll create later, operator type. and that's going to have the division button. Okay, so now we're going on to some of our numbers. So just copy this and modify it. Class name of button, and it's going to be calling a different function. It's going to be input num, and the first button is 7, so we're just going to copy this down for the next few buttons. So we need 2 more of these. So we have 7, 8, and 9. Then we're going to have our plus or our multiplication button. So I'm going to copy line 10 and put in an X. Then we'll have 3 more number buttons, 4, 5, and 6. So copy this line. So we'll put in 4, 5, 6, and then we're going to have our addition button. So I'm going to copy line 14 and put in the plus sign, and then we'll have our buttons 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So I have the button 1, 2, 3, and then we have our minus operation button. So put in the minus sign, and then our last 3 buttons are going to be the 0, the dot separator, and the equal sign. So I'm just going to copy line 21. So this is going to be button 0. This is going to be the dash. And then we're going to have the equals, but the equals will be calling a different function. We're going to have a function called equals. Okay. So we'll set up our state then for our functions. So we'll bring in, we'll be using useState and we'll be using useEffect. So we'll bring them in now quickly. Okay, so we have 5 pieces of state, so we'll set them up now. We'll have a piece of state for our previous state or current state. We'll have an input state, an operator state, and a total state. So we'll set up a use state for each one of these. Okay, so for our previous state, want to use state, and we'll set this to an empty string at the start. We'll do something similar for our current state. Now we're going to have our input. give this a string of 0. Okay, so const. We're using string because we'll be setting our output in the screen to a string each time. So the operator state, this will be used for every time we press one of the operator buttons. This will have an initial state of null, and then we're going to set up the state for our total. And this is going to be a boolean, so we're going to give it an initial state of false. Okay, so we'll quickly just set up empty functions for each of our functions we had in our JSX below. So we'll set up our number input first. I'm going to be using arrow functions, so it'll take an event. So for the operator button, this will be taking an event also, and our equals function then. So now we'll also have an event. 3 more, I think. So the const and we have our percent, and we have one more function then, the reset function. Now, just save that now. Okay, so we have an error. I'm after setting everything outside the function, so I'm just going to quickly copy these, and just above the return I'm going to paste them in here. Okay, so now you'll see all our buttons, all our numbers in a line. So we'll add our CSS now. So inside in our app.css, I'm going to delete everything. Okay, so our first piece of CSS, we're just going to set this on everything. We're going to give it a padding of 0 and a margin of 0 and a box sizing border box. And then to stop any of the buttons getting highlighted in blue, if you accidentally drag on any of the buttons, we're going to stop that. So we're going to say webkit /user select. I'm going to set that to none. And we're going to set it for user drag as well. Now, so that just stops people being able to select the text. See, when I hover my mouse over, they're not going blue. I'll just comment it out for 1 second. Now you see when I accidentally drag on the buttons, they're all getting highlighted in blue. So we'll comment that, and now if I try and drag, it's not happening. Okay, so now for the body. Going to set the background color first. We're going to give a display of grid. I'm going to place all the contents in the center. We're going to set the font family. And we're going to set it to a Google font, which I'm going to import now in a second. So Roberto, and then a default sans serif. I'm going to give it a height of 100 viewport height, and a width, sorry, we're going to give it a font size I'm going to set that to 2 REM. So we're going to target our container class now. I'll give that a height of 80 view height, a width of 50 view height. Set the background color to black. Give it a border radius we'll set the border radius to 1 REM. With a padding of 1 REM. So I'm just going to copy in the box shadow I got. I just generated this on a box shadow generator, so I'm just going to paste that in. You can pause the video here for a couple of seconds to copy in the box shadow. So I'm just going to save that now. Okay, now you can see our calculator layout. Okay, so now we're going to target the wrapper. So for the wrapper, we're going to say display grid. We'll set the height and the width to 100%. And we'll use grid templates columns. We'll have 4 rows and we'll have them 1 fraction each. So grid template columns, repeat 4 columns, and we'll set it 1 FR. And grid template rows, then we'll have 6 rows. Grid templates, repeat 6 rows, and we'll have 1 FR. And we're going to give a gap of 10. Okay, we can't see anything yet until we style our buttons. So we'll style our buttons now, and we'll say display grid. we'll place the content to the center. We'll set the background color to RGB 54, 52, 52, and we'll set them to be a circle, so border radius. Set that to 50%, and we'll set the color to white. And we'll have a cursor pointer, and we'll give the font weight a bold. So if we save that now you can see our buttons starting to appear. So we're going to style the screen, so just above the button, we want to say grid. We want this to stretch the whole way across the top of the screen, so we want to say grid column, and we're going to have it from the first row, and we want to spread the whole way across. So a quick way of doing that is just set it to -1. I'm going to set the color to white. Text align is going to be center. I'm going to give it a padding of 0.5 rem. Font size, we'll set the font size to 4 rem. We'll set the overflow to hidden. Now, okay, so after our button, then we're going to have a button hover, so .btn. Background color gray. So save that. Yeah, our buttons are displaying gray. Okay. Then our light gray buttons. So we'll target them next. So our light grey buttons. Set a background color here. Set the background color to grey and a color of black. Set the font color to black. Okay, that should be typo there, sorry. Now, okay, and we're going to have a hover state for these as well. Set the background color. This time we'll set the background color to white. Okay, so that's working. We're getting the grey on our numbers. Yeah, okay. So then for our class orange for our operators, set the background color to orange. And we'll have a hover effect on these as well. So the background color will be white. And we'll set the color to orange. And now, okay, so the 0 button, we want that to span 2 columns. So our 0 class, grid column, and we're going to have it span from the first one. We're going to span 2 columns. Okay, so save that. That's not after spanning for us, so jump into our app.js quickly. Scroll down to our 0 button. Okay, so that should be 0. Okay, so that should be button 0. Save that. Now it's spanning 2 columns, but it's not looking very well for us, so we're going to add some extra. So we're going to give it a border radius. And we'll set the border radius to 25 pixels. We're going to set place content. We're going to set that to onset. And align item center. And we're going to give the padding left to REM. Save that. Okay, now our button is looking better. Now, okay, so we're just going to quickly go to Google Fonts and get that font. So Google Fonts, click on Google Fonts. So here's the Roberto one. Scroll down to 300. So I'm going to select this one. Add import. So I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to go back to my app. Just going to replace this import here. And then for the CSS, the font family, I'm going to copy that. I want to go back into my app and down in the body, I want to replace this font family here. Save that. Now hopefully our CSS is working. Yeah, now we have our font, so we'll close that. So that's the layout of our calculator now. Now we'll get started with the JSX. So inside in the CSS, I'm going to delete everything in the index CSS as well. Okay, we don't need that. Okay, so inside in our app.js, if we scroll down to the screen, our screen class, screen. So inside the screen, we're going to display the input. So we save that. Now we're getting to 0. And I think I've set the text align incorrect. So if we go here, scroll down to screen. Yeah, the text align, we'll set this to right. Save that. Now, okay. So we'll go back into our app and we'll start working on our functions. Okay, so in our number function, or our input num, sorry. So inside the input num, we're going to be receiving an event. So input num, this is going to be called every time when we press one of the buttons. Okay, so inside here, we're going to check a few conditions first. So we're going to say if the current state includes the dot, and we're going to check if the e.target I'm going to check the inner text on that. I'm going to check if that's equal to the dot. So if the two of them match, we're just going to simply return and do nothing. And why we're doing this is if we're typing in a number and we type it in as a decimal place, we don't want to be able to type in two decimal places. So we're checking our current state if it includes a dot, and then if we press the dot again, the inner text is going to be the dot, so it's not going to let us type in two dots. And our second thing we're going to be checking, so we're going to say if the total, so we're going to say if the total is true, we're going to set the previous state. So we're going to set our previous state to nothing, and we're setting our previous state to nothing because, so if we have a total, so we're after pressing the equals button, then once we press the equals button, the total is set to true, and once we let the calculator know that we're pressing equals, we don't want to continue the calculations in the background. So then we set the previous state to be nothing. So then we're going to check, we have one more condition. So if there's a current state, if we have a current state set, we're going to set the current state, and we're going to set it to what was in the previous current state. We're taking what was in the previous current state, and we're just going to add in the next button that we press. So we're saying e.target.inner text. So by doing this, if we press 7 and we press 7 again, we'll get 77. But if there wasn't any previous state, we're starting out a calculation, you won't have any current state. We're just going to set the current state to the e.target.inner text. And after all that's done, we're going to set the total back to false to get ready for our next calculations. Okay, so now for our useEffect, oh sorry, I'm just after noticing here, so we need to set this to the previous state of our current state. So this should be pre plus e.target.inner text. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is call our useEffect. And inside our useEffect, every time the current state changes. So every time the current state changes, we're going to set our input to the current state. So we're going to say set input current state. Okay, and then one more useEffect, and this is going to be called just once when the app loads. So we have empty square brackets at the end, and we're going to set our input, and we're going to set the input to a string of 0. useEffect is not defined. We have an error. Scroll up. Oh, I have a capital U. This should be a small u when we're importing it. Okay, so now when we type in, we're getting our numbers. So I'll just quickly recap on what we're doing. Refresh that again. We haven't the reset button done. So once we press a number, we're getting the number in our input screen. So once we press the button once, it's not including the dot, and the inner text is not equal to the dot, so we're passing that. So if there's a total, there's no total. We're not setting our previous state to anything. And then it's checking if there's a current state. there's not a current state at the start, so we're just setting the current state to the e.target.innerText, which was the 7. So the second time we press the button, we will have a current state, so we press 8. Now you can see it's concatenating all the figures. Okay. I might just do the reset button next, so we can reset everything. So after our useEffect, or no, we have them down here. So in our reset, we're going to set the previous state. We're going to set the previous state to an empty string. And we're going to set the current state also to an empty string. And then we're going to set the input to a string of 0. Okay, save that. Now, so, okay. Let me press, yeah, now we're getting our input. Okay, so our next function then is going to be the operator type. So for the operator type takes in an event. So every time we press our add button or our minus button, we want to set the total to false. So we're letting the app know that we want to continue our calculations in the background. So false. We want to set the operator to e.target.innerText. Now we want to check if there's a current state. So if we have a current state and that current state is equal to an empty string, we want to just return and do nothing. We're going to check if there's a previous state also. But we're going to say we're just checking if the previous state is not equal to nothing. So if we have a previous state, we want to call our equals function to calculate or to perform our calculation and store it in memory. And we're going to set the previous state equal to the current state, so we can do our calculation on the next. And we're going to set the current state to blank. So every time we press an operator, we're setting the total to false. So we're letting the app know that it's not, we're not doing the equals function. We're going to set the operator to the e.target.innerText, and if we have no current state, we don't want to do anything, so we're returning. So then we're checking if we have a previous state, we want to perform the calculation equals, and we're going to create that function in a second, and we're going to set the previous state to the current state so we can continue calculating, and we're going to set the current state to nothing. So we're going to create our equals one now. So we're going to say, so if we're just going to put a question mark to check if there was an event. So if the target dot inner text is equal to the equal sign. So if we're actually looking for the final value and we're not continuing doing a calculation, if we want the result, we're going to set the total to true. So after we check that, we're just going to have a variable called calc. And we're going to use a switch operator to to determine what operation we want to do. So we're going to say use a case with the switch. So we're going to check if it's a division first. We're going to set the calc equal to a string, and it's going to be in a string type, so we're going to parse float the previous state divided by parse float current state. If that's true, then we want to break. We want to stop the switch. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this down for the next few things. It's going to be more or less the same for the rest of them, so I'm going to copy this. And the next one we're checking for if it's a plus. We're going to add the two states. If it's a multiplication, so we're checking for the x. We're going to multiply them. And then if it's negative, we're going to subtract them. I'm just going to say a default, then for default we're just going to return. Okay, I'm going to close our switch statement. So after we check all them, we're going to set the input. We'll set it to an empty string. We're going to set the previous state to the calculation that was just done above. So we're going to set that to calc. And we're going to set the current state back to an empty string to get ready for the next calculation. Okay, so we save that. Oh, we have an error. Forgot to put that there. So that's our if statement. Just check our brackets now. So you can see our display is not displaying now because we're actually setting the input state to 0. But we want to display if the input state is blank or 0. We want to display the previous state. So we're going to install a package called React Number Format, which is going to format the numbers with commas and for 1000 separators. So I'm just going to split my screen here now. I'm going to say npm I React -number -format. So just let that install out. Okay, so now that package is installed for us, so to get our input, we're going to modify our input down in our screen section. So first of all, we're going to check if the input is not equal to blank. So if it's not empty, then we're going to say or the input is equal to 0 as a string. I'm just going to toggle on the word wrap here. Okay. So then we're going to use our number format. I'm just going to import it at the top first. I'm going to say import number format. From React number format. So go back down to our screen then. Where are we? Here. So the input is not equal to blank, or the input is equal to 0. We're going to display number format, and inside the number format we're going to give it a value equals input. I'm going to set the display type equal to text. And we're going to set the 1000 separator to true. So then our next, so if we have something in there, just close this here. So then we're saying if the input is not equal to blank and the input is equal to 0, we want to show the input, which will be 0. Just have a typo there. Now, so if the conditions above are not true, then we want to display the value is going to be equal to the previous state. And then we're going to have the display type is going to be text also. And then the 1000 separator is going to be true also, which I've spelled wrong. And I have a typo here too. So we save that now. It's displaying first, so cancel button is still working. 8 plus 7 equals 15. So 10 plus 11, 21. Okay, so we're nearly there now. So the next function we want to create, so we go back up, is to put the minus and the plus button working. So if we want to do a calculation on a negative number, so this is fairly easy. So inside the minus plus, we're going to check if the current state, the character at is equal to 0. So we're checking to see if that's already done. So we're going to say if the current state dot dash char at So the first position is 0, an index of 0. We're going to check if that is equal to a negative. And if that is, then we're going to set the current state. I'm going to set the current state to the substring substring 1. Else we're going to set the current state to negative sign, and we're going to concatenate it with the current state. Now, so if we save that now, we reset our app. So if we put in an 8, we have the 8, we press the minus button. Now you can see is after setting it to a -8, we press it again, it goes back to 8. So back to 9, and press the button, we toggle off the plus and the minus. Okay, so then we just have our percentage button. This is our last one. So for our percentage button, we're going to set the previous. We're going to check for a previous state, sorry. So if we have a previous state, we're going to set the current state. And we're going to set it to a string. And we're going to parse float it because it's going to be in a string coming in. Parse float. And then we're going to parse float the current state. To divide that by 100. Then we're going to multiply it by the previous state. That's just a work. That's just a calculation to get the percent. And if we don't have a previous state, we're just going to divide the current state by 100. So set the current state to a string. Same again, parse float parse float the current state divided by 100. So we've saved that now. I have a typo. String here, that should be capital S. Okay, so what we're doing here is we just say we have 100. If we press the percentage button now, we won't have any previous state. So if we press percentage button, we get 1. Now, so if we do 100, we'll say plus 10%. So that's 10, and we press equals, we get 110. So that's pretty much it. If we do it multiplied by 1000, then we should get our number formats. We do, you can see the comma separator. Then we have our decimal, so we put in the decimal, we press 5, we press the decimal again, it won't let us put in any more decimal places. If we add 1 to that, we get 1.55 plus 2. Okay, and then we're able to do, okay, so if we do 8 plus 8 plus 8, okay, if we have an error, it's not doing all the calculations in the background, so let me see in the operator type. Oh, on line 38 we need an else here, sorry. else, and then we'll move these into the else statement. We'll save that now. So now if we do 8 plus 8 plus 8, now we're getting the 24. So we're keeping track of our calculations in the background now as well. So if we do 8 negative, so we do a minus 8 plus 4, we get our minus 4. Yeah, so all our calculations is good now. So we do 5 plus 2, and then we click the plus button again, we're getting the previous calculation shown, and if we do plus 5 again, yeah. Okay, thanks very much for watching the video. I hope you learned something from this. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel and help get the content out to anyone else that is interested in learning React and JavaScript. Thanks very much. We'll see you all in the next video.